I was going to do a full replacement video, but I'm just actually going to give some tips and tricks along the way as to what I learned during the replacement. Sorry, I don't have a step-by-step process. So let's go through a few of those things that I learned the hard way. Bit of a long story and a painful one. When I did my motor swap out because of my timing belt going and grenading my engine, I had to replace the engines. When I was putting it back on, I accidentally put the non-toothed wheel on the outside when it's actually supposed to be on the inside, as you can tell by the power steering pump. Anyway, you have about 1 centimeter worth of space to work with in there. So this really sucks, and it looks not too sucky because what I did was I just pulled out the motor mount, just that puck that hangs there. It's 3 bolts. If you're doing your timing belt, this will probably make things a million times easier for getting inside of there. And overall, just working inside of here, it's something I haven't seen when people are working on their timing belt. So there's a little tip for you about doing your timing belt or any work in here is you can pull this off. Right now, underneath the vehicle, I have a jack that has a piece of wood on the oil pan. Typically not best practice, but it's just enough to keep it in place when I pulled out the motor mount. And now what I can do is I can get inside of here at an angle with a flex neck to get those 4 bolts that are normally just horrendous to get at. Hello, Mr. Transmission. Some of the things we don't think through when we're doing the job. Transmission takes 2 liters of some exotic fluid that, I don't know, has unicorn blood in it. It's $35 a liter. Thank goodness it's only 2 liters. But if you do an engine swap, you will lose all 2 liters. Don't bother trying to Mickey Mouse. It's going to be gone all the way. And on the topic of transmissions, while you're in there, if you're doing this engine swap, I have done some pretty crappy clutch jobs. This would probably be one of them if it wasn't for the fact that it was already out. If you're doing an engine swap, take that opportunity to do the clutch if you can. I mean, it's pretty much as easy as changing a light bulb compared to how it is when it's inside of the car. So you can check out videos on that. Sucks big time, but replacing the clutch while the engine's out, like 5-minute job. When you take out the engine, be prepared to spend a lot of time in this area. You'll notice that I've taken off a screw here to get better access when we were tearing stuff out. Of course, you're going to have to take your CV joints out. You're going to have to take these bolts off. My CV joints would not come out no matter how much we He-Man them, and we just really didn't want to bother with it more than we had to. So be prepared to loosen up some brake lines and a few other things. But the highest you can raise the car, the better. These are the cutesy jacks. I have a real 2-ton or 4-ton jack on the other side. Made things way easier, but you're definitely going to need 2 jacks in order to do it. And like I said, you're going to lose all of your transmission fluid. See this filthy? That's your AC pump. If you have one, prepare to hate it until the ends of the earth. You're going to have 4 bolts. Sorry if the lighting's a little bad. 1 here, 1 here, and then 2 very similar on the other side. Honest to God, this one in the back is the hardest to get to. Once that's off, the rest are pretty easy. Take this one from the top, and then when you get underneath, it's honestly easier to get your AC pump from the bottom with those 2 bolts. Make sure you don't accidentally crack this bolt. I did that and got a face full of Freon. Now I'm probably gonna have to recharge it to some degree. Pull out your fans. I didn't do that the first time. I did it the second time. Long story. Made things a gazillion times easier. That is your exhaust manifold. You're going to have to wiggle that like a million times. It catches on everything when you're doing this process. So every time you lift it up a little bit, give it a wiggle, move it out of your way. It will catch on everything and it will break things. Might be a little hard to see because the battery is missing, but this is the battery plate. We had to get really savage in order to make enough clearance here. We just wound up cutting part of the plate off because we couldn't pull it off. It's welded to the frame, and it was just that little bit of difference that was making it impossible for us to get out. You feel free to leave some comments if you were able to do it without having to do that, but the big problem was that we were snagging on here on the brake system. So this, and I think there was another sensor somewhere that I couldn't find right now, but it was also catching. So this is going to be one of the trickier parts to get off, and that is why we wound up cutting that, as savage as that looks. All right, getting in here, this starts to really suck more so when you're putting it back in. You may notice, I think those are brake lines. I can't remember if they're brake or fuel. I think they're brake. And the way this goes over top is like a horseshoe, and it lands on top of that. And so you need to be really careful about that when you don't pinch your brake lines going back in because the whole weight of the engine could crush those lines. That really sucked. So there's 3 bolts there, and then you're going to notice up at the front by your radiator that there's going to be 1 bolt from the top, and then there's 2 bolts on the side. I actually had to disassemble that whole, it's almost like a puck that's in the middle. I had to pull the bolt out of that and then pull that apart to be able to get the actual mount off, to be able to give me enough clearance to get past the radiator. You might be able to do it without that, but just as a cautionary note. Engine mount, I don't have it on me, but you'll notice some black, also puck-like item on this one. I pulled that off, and then that let the engine off on that side. So that gave me a little more wiggle room all the way around. So another thing is that I don't know about other places, but all the parts places I called looking for this gasket for the oil pump were wrong. They had a gasket, O-ring gasket, crankshaft, harmonic balancer, whatever you want to call it. They were all 3550, which is the inside and outside diameter. And if you want to be technical, it's 3558 is what they'll list. That's wrong. It is 3548.8. And you cannot force that in. It is a very tight fit. And what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to take a screwdriver and just slowly go around the edge to try and whittle that back on. And don't forget, your oil pump has 2 little notches on it that need to fit over top of the harmonic balancer. So don't go trying to He-Man that on. You need to twist that around until it lines up well with what you're doing. So again, that's 3548.8 should be the size of that gasket, O-ring, whatever you want to call it, when replacing the oil pump, which apparently is also a really common problem on the Kias. One thing that really sucked about buying this engine secondhand was that I don't do engine swaps too often, but this bracket on the old engine, which had obviously been in a collision, was broken. I didn't realize this until it was actually in for the second time, and I went to mount the alternator, which is where that goes. So when you buy a secondhand engine, make sure you inspect it inside and out. This has caused a month of delays for a variety of reasons.